First of all, I'd like to thank AMCA for this invitation. Give me a great opportunity to share with you what Singapore is doing pertaining to driving BIM in the construction industry. First, just to share with you a little bit about myself, I'm a mechanical engineer by training. I started my career more than 20 years ago as a testing and design engineer before I moved on to manage IT projects for the construction industry. And I joined the Building Construction Authority in the year 2000. I'm also a member of this Building Smart Chapter, which basically tried to drive the open beam concept for the construction industry. As for my organization, Building Construction Authority, this is the statutory board under the Ministry of National Development. And basically, we regulate as well as develop the construction industry in Singapore. So this morning, I'm going to share with you on the Singapore BIM roadmap, which will cover both aspects of regulations as well as industry development. I'll start with basically this agenda. What's our target, the reason why we're doing it, and also what are the challenges and strategies that we put in place. So this is our target in terms of driving BIM adoption in Singapore. It's basically to get the Singapore construction industry to use BIM widely by the year 2015. And that target basically we are looking at is getting 80% of the construction firms in Singapore to widely adopt this BIM by the year 2015. The question is, why are we pushing this so hard? I think this has been covered by Earl this morning as well. Productivity. Basically, we want to improve our productivity. In Singapore, I think we face different challenges in terms of the construction industry from other countries because we have a lot of availability of these low-cost foreign workers. I think the climate here is slightly different. You don't face this issue. And of course, once you have these foreign workers, these are also transient workers. And after a while, you don't see this improvement in productivity because they come and go. That's why in Singapore, I think we have this urgency to really try to push ahead in improving productivity, because we have also introduced a lot of levy charges. Now, I mean, the last 2 years have increased our levy charges on foreign workers. That's why we are encouraging firms to try to raise their productivity. And to address these challenges, I think BCA have formulated this, what we call this construction productivity roadmap, in consultation with our industry expert and also international experts. And this overarching roadmap basically aims to realize the vision of a highly integrated and technological advanced construction tech sector led by progressive firms and supported by a skilled and competent workforce by the year 2020. So this is the larger productivity, so-called vision that we have. I think in Singapore, in terms of productivity drive, we are not targeting just the construction sector. It's a productive movement targeting at all the key sectors in Singapore. But specifically for the construction sector, we have formulated this construction productivity roadmap. And in this roadmap, basically we have targeted at 3 areas. One is really to look at workforce development. The other one is look at technology adoption. And the last one is at capability development. And under these 3 thrusts, if you look at technology adoption, you'll realize that BIM is one of those drivers that we are looking at to drive this technology adoption. So now I will just move on to describe to you what are the strategies that we place in terms of trying to drive this BIM adoption in Singapore. First, the challenges that we face. I think these challenges are no different from what you're having here. The first one is basically the lack of demand for BIM. The second is the entrenched behavior in the current 2D drafting practices. The third is also the steep learning curve to build up the BIM expertise. And the fourth is basically the lack of ready pool of skilled BIM manpower. I believe these are the same challenges that we face here. So what are the strategies that we have in place? We have a number. First, it's basically getting the public sector to take the lead. Second is to promote success stories. How do we remove impediments? And how do we build up BIM capability and capacity? And the last one is how do we incentivize people to come in the BIM record? The first strategy, public sector taking the lead. I think public sector have a key role to play in influencing the behavior of the construction industry, because public sector is also one of the biggest developer, especially in Singapore. So one of our strategies is basically how to get the public sector in as the early adopter of the BIM technology. Let me just share with you this global perspective. If you look around, all over the world, US, UK, Norway, Finland, Hong Kong, Korea, etc., most of them have, in some form or another, tried to mandate the use of BIM. And these are the government agencies doing it. And in Singapore, we are also doing the same approach. In terms of trying to get the public sector to drive up the BIM adoption, what we did in BCA is that in the year 2010, we actually set up a Center for Construction IT in BCA to help key public agency and construction firms to kickstart BIM. And in 2011, that was last year, we actually worked very closely with the public agencies on pilot projects. And in 2012, which is this year, we actually work with the key government agencies to prepare consultants, their consultants and their contractors, who undertake public sector projects to be BIM ready. So these are some of the steps that we have taken. And on top of that, I think as a regulatory authority, we have also mandate the use of BIM. Starting with 2013, we actually mandate that the architects, when they submit any building plans for regulatory approval, they have to use BIM by 2013, July 2013, starting with projects greater than 20,000 square meters. And in 2014, we have mandated that the engineers, which means the mechanical, electrical, and the structural engineers also have to submit BIM for regulatory approval for building projects greater than 20,000 square meters. And by 2015, almost everybody, architects, engineers, with building projects greater than 5,000 square meters, they must submit BIM to the various government agencies. So this is the target that we have set for the construction industry, and we have also announced this set of targets to the industry last month. And if you look at the target setting, the reason why we are setting 20,000 square meters and then 5,000 square meters is that we also want to calibrate the approach that we are taking. By setting 20,000 square meters, basically you'll get the larger firms to first come on board. And then we give ourselves another 3 years for the smaller firms. Hopefully by the year 2015, all of them will be BIM ready. So this is a strategy that we have put in place. to drive up the BIM adoption. And the reason why we are able to push for this so-called BIM submission is that as far back as year 2001, we have already set up electronic submission system in Singapore, whereby we also mandate in 2001 then that all building approval submission to regulatory agencies can only come in electronic form, no more paper drawings. So now in Singapore, if you have a firm in Singapore, and if you want to submit any plans for regulatory approval, whether to the urban authority, to the building authority, to the fire safety authority, you can only submit in electronic form, which means you can log in into internet and then you submit your drawings. We no longer accept paper-based drawings, and that we have done since 2001. That's why it actually allows us, moving forward, to make it easier for us now to accept electronic submission in BIM model as well. So this is one of the key reasons that we are quite confident that we can push for higher BIM adoption, because we have already transformed the industry since 2001 from paper-based to electronic-based submission. And this one just shows you what we want to do, from a 2D electronic submission to a BIM submission, all via internet. And when we started the journey to try to mandate, we actually started as far back as 2010, where we actually opened up our electronic submission system in 2010 to allow any architects who are BIM ready to get them to submit through our system. And April last year, we have also opened up our e-submission system to allow any engineers, mechanical or structures, who are BIM ready to submit BIM model as well. So even before we mandate, we have already allowed people to submit their BIM model. Because there are some firms who are more ready than others and would like basically to submit as early as possible. So we try not to so-called stop that. So that's for the public sector taking the lead in driving BIM. Next, I'll just briefly share with you promoting success stories, which I think is a very important part, I think, which is what this forum is all about. Is basically try to promote success stories to get greater awareness. And we do this on many fronts. We organize seminars, workshops, roundtable sessions, roadshows, awards, competition. So we have done a lot of activities just to raise the awareness of the industry in Singapore. The other thing that we realized that is very important is what we call this, doing this BIM competition. And we have organized quite a number of them. Basically what this BIM competition does is that this is a 48-hour BIM competition. That means within 48 hours, teams must do the design, the planning, right up to the scheduling part within 48 hours, and submit their model in stages within 48 hours to the judges. What we realized through this BIM competition is that not only it raises awareness among the firms, but it also allows the firms, and more important, the bosses of the firm, okay, that within 48 hours, you can actually do a very complex project, starting from planning to design to collaboration with the architects M&E engineers, structural engineers, with the contractors. And all this can be done within 48 hours. And the boss actually realized the full benefit that things like this can be done quickly and is possible. And for the members of the firm who participate in this 48-hour BIM competition, they themselves also realize that actually they are able to communicate within their own firm. In the past, maybe all of them work in silos, but the competition forced them to work in a collaborative and integrated manner. And through this competition, they realized that things can be done quickly if they are able to discuss together in a small group. I think which is what Peter also mentioned just now, what you call the co-location part. Yeah. So this BIM competition actually raised a lot of awareness on the possibilities of how things can be done. And we are not even talking about simple 1 or 2 story kind of model. We are talking about a commercial complex multi-story kind of thing in this BIM competition. So it has been very successful so far. And in Singapore, what we are planning is next year I'm planning for one international BIM competition, and I also hope to invite some of you to participate as well. Yeah. The other thing that we do is that we also engage a lot of international experts to come to Singapore to give visionary workshop. One of the things that we have done last year is that we also organize an international panel of experts for BIM. And this international expert, we get it from States, Korea, UK, etc. Basically to come to Singapore. And then we have a 3-day roundtable kind of discussion together, open up to the industry to discuss how we want to move forward in the BIM journey. So it has also been a very fruitful session for us because we get to learn about best practices from overseas and also able to benchmark ourselves against what other people are doing. So this is something that we have done in 2011, and next year we are going to organize the second international panel of experts for BIM in Singapore. Okay, the third thing I'm going to talk about in terms of strategy is removing impediments. And I think this is one of the areas that I want to commend AMCA and also the BIM MEP initiative, which you are doing in terms of the principle that you all put in terms of this initiative, trying to get these things to be vendor neutral, trying to have this inclusive and collaborative environment. And this is something that we also adhere to in terms of the principle that we are trying to adopt to remove impediments for people coming aboard this BIM journey. I mentioned earlier in my slide that we have set up this Center for Construction IT. The reason why we set this up is because we want to have a so-called dedicated group in Singapore to really look at how to handhold the industry towards the BIM journey. And we also look at outreach programs, training, and standards. I think in Singapore, because we are a very small city, I think it's easier for us to do the hand-holding, which has been proved to be very successful in the sense that any companies in Singapore that face difficulty in doing the BIM journey, they can call us, we will send our people down, and we will sit beside them and handhold them through that process. And we have been doing that FOC for the last 2 years. And this is something that is very appreciative by the industry. But I guess that we can do that in Singapore because we are small. Maybe it's a bit difficult for us to do here. but in terms of principle, you probably can do it through the what we call through the web or internet. I think the same principle can be applied where you can actually handhold people, right? This is something that we realize is quite critical in terms of trying to push the success of BIM industry. You need to help the people to cross the barrier. And if you rely on vendors, sometimes that's a bit difficult because vendors really only help you through the specific software. Sometimes they don't really talk about integration or the re-engineering. But for us, in the Center for Construction IT, we not only look at the software, we look at the process that you have in your company. What are the process changes that's required? What are the things that you have to watch out for? Things like this. It's more of a holistic approach, which is quite important for people to change from 2D to BIM. Because 2D to BIM is not about changing software. Basically, it's talking about process change in your company. And one of the most important things is that you need the right people in the company to come along the BIM journey. Yeah. And under this center that we have also developed a lot of template and guidelines. And this is just a sample of the template and guideline that we have. Maybe I just spend a little bit more time to talk about this because to me, this is one of the so-called critical success factor that have allowed us to get more people on board. What we did in terms of this, what we call the submission template, okay, is that we work very closely with the key software vendors, people like Autodesk, Bentley, Check, Graphisoft. We work with them to develop what we call a submission template. Okay, like I explained earlier, we have already mandated that you have to submit your drawings only in electronic form to the various government agencies. So when we want to push for BIM, we actually develop what we call this submission template, which is embedded in Autodesk Revit or in a Bentley or in ArchiCAD. And this template, when it pop up, it allows the architect or engineers to create the BIM model following a submission template that complies with the various government agencies' requirements. So we've set up the different layer, whether it's urban planning, fire safety, building control. So we set up some kind of template. And when they create the BIM model within the template, they are also able to, in the same so-called template, create what we call the plan view, sectional view, stuff like that. And all saved in one single file. And that single file, when they submit via the internet to the various government agencies, and when the government agencies receive it, when they pop it up, you can see the BIM model as well as the traditional view in sectional, in plan elevation. This is important because it actually also allows the government officers to transit from just looking at 2D electronic plans to viewing the BIM model as well as their traditional 2D plans, all within the single file. So this template actually makes it easier for us to convince the industry that it's quite easy for any one of them currently using their Autodesk Revit or whatever to move on to using this template to submit as a BIM model to the government agencies. And this has been successfully implemented, and we have done that for architectural, structural, and MEP as well. The other thing that we're doing is that we're also producing this step-by-step electronic guide. This is something new, that we have done. What we call the add-on modules. Using a BIM model allows you to do simulations, computations, and many others design. In Singapore, we have legislated a few things. We have legislated what we call the buildability score. We have legislated what we call the green mark score, which is probably equivalent to your Australia's Green Star. Is it Green Star rating? Yeah. And CUI is what we call the concrete usage index, and also the constructability score. So we have defined some of these things in terms of what we would like to receive as a regulatory body. So to so-called make it easy for the architects, engineers to comply with this score, instead of they preparing a separate schedule, separate documentations. Once they have created a BIM model, some of this scoring could be done automatically through the add-on modules. So this is something that we have worked very closely with the various solution providers to develop these add-on modules, and these add-on modules are given to the architects, engineers. So this is something we are trying to push very hard, okay? And I think AMCA is probably also doing the same thing, yeah. We have also set up some kind of BIM steering committee, and this BIM steering committee actually comprises mainly industry players, academics, and even lawyers. We have lawyers in this BIM steering committee as well. And we actually look at how to develop strategic direction and guidance, and of course to look at funding, things like this. But more important is really look at how to focus on areas to remove impediments. So we have this BIM steering committee comprising industry body, of course, plus the government agencies as well, to look at the whole effort in Singapore. Why lawyers, you may ask? Because one of the tasks under the BIM steering committee is to set up a legal and contractual work group. And we get a lawyer, in fact, a few lawyers involved in drafting out some kind of guidelines for us. Because if you look at the literature overseas and also some of the case studies, I think one of the main concerns is on the legal part, how you treat a 2D drawing and how you treat a 3D model, who is responsible. Because in a 3D model, you pass from one further to another. At the end of the day, if something goes wrong, who is responsible for what? So through this legal and contractual work group, we try to set up some kind of framework to tackle some of these so-called potential issues that may come up. Yeah. And we also came out with a Singapore BIM Guide recently, which we have just launched in May. And one of the new areas that we're looking at developing is what we call a discipline-specific work group. I think this is exactly what AMC is looking at. BIM, MEP, we are looking purely at mechanical, yeah. So like I mentioned, we have launched the Singapore BIM Guide in May this year. We also try to set up some kind of forum, mainly to get experienced BIM user to come together. Because there are many so-called strong BIM users out there in the industry. And most of them, somehow, through their work with the software, they can find out what are the kind of defects, what kind of bugs, and how they overcome some of these things. So what we're going to do is to gather all these people together, to share their knowledge on how they overcome some of the limitations on some of the software, if any. But more important is also to have a forum, okay, whereby we can get the user feedback, and this will be so-called, the secretariat will be, for example, BCA, and we'll try to gather their feedback. And as a government agencies, I think we have a stronger pull to so-called try to influence some of the vendors to really look at some of the issues or technical defects that are out there and try to get them to make the necessary changes. So this is something that we are looking at. And currently the software vendor in Singapore is quite supportive of this area as well, because it will also help them to improve their software product at the same time. Right. I think Peter mentioned this earlier about basically engaging client. So I mentioned earlier that public sector is one of the biggest clients. And then of course, the other one is the private sector. So we are pushing very hard to get the building owners in Singapore, the developers, mainly the developers, to come on board the BIM wagon. So we organize a lot of ROI workshops targeting purely developers. And some of them have even mandate within their own projects from 2012 that all their consultant contractors must use BIM, which is very encouraging for us. So this is an important thing to do to get the client interested, involved, and also for them to specify BIM in their projects. And this is something that we have done recently. Last year, we actually get these various government entities, okay, to stipulate for their new public sector BIM projects to require the use of BIM. And then in June this year, I mentioned that we have launched the BIM requirements and also the BIM particular condition, which was crafted by the lawyers, basically to give them some kind of documentation. If any of the developers or firms that want to use BIM, they can actually look at the particular condition and how to weave that in to their existing contract. We try not to make it too complicated from the existing contract because most of the existing contract is well established. So this particular condition is basically an addendum. If you use BIM, then this is what you should do. Other than that, I think the contract more or less is the same. So this is to ease the way forward for the people. And I believe this is something that you all may also be looking at. Yeah. Okay, now I'll talk about building capability and capacity, which I think is also very important and which I think you have the same problem here because of the lack of the expertise in manpower in BIM. So what we have is that we have developed some kind of program in Singapore targeting from the very low level, from modeling, all the way up to BIM management. So we have a suite of programs looking at students, looking at existing draftsperson. Okay. In terms of existing professionals, that means those already working in the industry but have not used BIM before. We have a series of programs to try to bring them up to speed, starting with a certificate in BIM modeling. And then we have also recently introduced a specialist dip in BIM. This is already the third run. And new areas that we're looking at is basically what we call a team-based re-engineering, which I think is going to be of more relevance as more and more people get familiar with BIM, because once you are in BIM, you are actually not working alone. You have to work as a team with other people from other disciplines. And team-based kind of working relationship is very important in terms of defining the kind of communication protocol that you want to exchange from one another, in terms of specifying what kind of information you need from the person that's going to hand to you that kind of BIM model. So this is something that we are looking at in terms of project collaboration. And the other thing that we are targeting is what we call the senior awareness course, looking at the C-level executive, trying to conduct free lessons, okay, for the bosses to get them interested in this course. And the free lessons probably may come with lunch as well. Yeah. But I think it's important because really the clients are really the main driver for change if you want to change it fast. Yeah. Okay, like I mentioned earlier also, in terms of building capability, we have done competition, expert program, hand-holding, training, skills certification, and also some workshop. And we continue to organize more of these workshops, also in close collaboration with overseas partners and software vendors. I think we have to continue to have this kind of engagement to get more and more people aware and involved in this whole exercise. And the reason why we are doing this more aggressively is that because we have already announced that by next year, 2013, architects must submit a BIM model. So we want to make sure that we can reach out to as many of them as possible within this time frame. In terms of equipping future generations, what I meant here is people studying diploma, people in the vocational institute, people in the universities. If you look around, probably in Australia as well, people, your vocational institute, your so-called diploma institution, and possibly also your university, I think most of them may not have a major BIM kind of a curriculum in their modules. So we are working very closely with the Institution of Higher Learning in Singapore, not only to educate the lecturers, but also to work very closely with them so that they can put in place a BIM curriculum in most of their programs. This is important because BIM is basically the next generation. If you want to transform your industry, I'm sorry to say, I think we cannot rely on the current group. You have to look really at the people coming to the industry. These are the people that will really help us to transform the industry. Yeah. And that's why we are putting a lot of effort on the people studying in the diploma. Because once they learn in school, the moment they join the industry, they're not going to use 2D, they will definitely use BIM. And they can do it very fast. And this has been demonstrated by the 48 hours competition. People who have been trained in BIM only for 3 months can come in the competition and do it very fast. This is how so-called conversant they are with new IT technology. Yeah. And this is just a list of so-called programs that we have in BCA Academy. BCA Academy is basically the training arm of the Building Construction Authority. And I'm also taking care of these programs in BCA Academy. Basically what we did is that for all the diploma programs in our school, I've introduced this BIM module in their programs. And this has been very successful. In actual fact, when we did the 48 hours competition, okay, immediately when the so-called competition finished, a lot of firms in the industry want to engage the students before they graduate. Why? Because there's really a big gap of BIM expertise in the industry. We are facing that problem in Singapore now. There are not enough people that is BIM trained, okay, in Singapore. And one of the concern that people raise to me is that poaching. You poach people from one firm to another. Yeah. So we try to mitigate that kind of problem by having more people trained in BIM. Right? You probably will face similar problem here as you embark on a BIM journey, because there are not enough BIM practitioners in the industry at the moment. Yeah. Okay, this is the last one about incentivizing BIM adopters, and I think so far when I share this overseas, apparently it seems that Singapore is the only one doing this. What I meant is that we actually give money out to the industry. I mentioned to you about the earlier on about the construction productivity roadmap. Under the construction productivity roadmap, we were given $250 million Sing to try to improve the construction productivity, whether through mechanization, whether through workforce development, or capability development, or even training consultancy. And under that 250 million, for the BIM part, we were given some money to the tune of about 12 million for now, okay, to try to incentivize people to come on board. What I meant by incentivize is that we give 50% subsidy. Let's say if you are company A, okay, you want to come on board a BIM journey, you want to buy software, we will pay 50% of the cost for that software. You want to go for training, we will pay 50% for the training. So we incentivize up to 50%. And this has been quite helpful in terms of getting people to come on board. Because it helped to deflate the cost of software, hardware, training, and consultancy. And I think we started in 2010, the Building Information Fund, Modeling Fund. And since then, you see there are more than 300 projects. Okay. Now I just want to share with you 3 case studies. That means people that have applied for the fund, and then what is the kind of outcome they have. This is one of the company. Productivity gain, request for information reduced by 52%. All this translate to cost saving. And what you see at the bottom is basically equivalent to your mechanical kind of. So what this company does is that it actually integrates the architect, structure, and MEP together. But this is a multidisciplinary firm. Another company, 9 to 10% saving when they embark on this BIM project. Because one of the criteria in terms of before we give the BIM fund is that you must finish the actual project, and you must demonstrate to us that you have at least 10% productivity gain. Then we give you that 50%. Yeah, they have to pay first. Yeah. Okay. The last one is about this firm level scheme. One of the firm which actually save up to 138 hours in terms of manpower savings. Because I think you realize by now that if you use a BIM model, you save a lot of time producing sectional views. Because BIM model allows you to slice here, slice there, and you can produce any sectional views that you want. And those kind of saving is basically very significant. Okay. So this is something that we realize that through incentivizing, it helps us in pushing the BIM movement in Singapore. Okay. So basically this is what I'm going to share with you. And in closing, I just have one simple remark. Basically now, you know, the Olympics is on. The motto for the Olympics is basically higher, faster, stronger. So I hope the motto for the construction industry is that through BIM, we can be cheaper, better, faster. Right? Thank you.